USA especially. So this is the Peace Through Action USA Nonviolent Communication class on 11th of May, 2022. It's co-creating connection, using nonviolent communication to find a way to connect at the heart, hopefully. The invitation, I'd love to see your faces, but part of nonviolence is adding choice and respecting everyone's choice. So if you're willing to come on camera, it helps me to kind of get a gauge of just who we are together. And if I see puzzlement on a face, that'll help me on my end. So I really miss in-person groups, and also really treasure the opportunity that Zoom offers. It's a great technology that's emerged, especially since the shutdown. So let me share my screen. I'm going to give an overview of my plan to see if this seems what you're coming for. I'm a certified trainer with the Center of Nonviolent Communication, which means that I had studied for at least 50 days of training and had some mentoring, and there was some agreement that I had some understanding so that CNVC, the Center for Nonviolent Communication, had confidence in my showing up with groups. So the plan for today is to have just an essence of this nonviolent communication perspective. And then we'll do a little bit of a checkout, just a 5-minute breakout in pairs. Then I'll go over a presentation of the basics of nonviolent communication. And then there'll be another opportunity to practice a little bit with a partner. So you can offer some privacy. Sometimes folks are shy to speak in the big group, so to say. And then just do whatever we need to do with questions and answers and a wrap up. So that's the plan. If anyone has anything they'd like to add, just wave. I can't see you, but Jessica can. And I'm open to hearing any input and feedback. Yeah, so nonviolence. What is violent communication anyway? For me, it's either a high bar or a low bar. To me, violence is any kind of human disconnection. If I have a judgment of myself or others, and I'm holding that, to me, that's less than connected, less than feeling fully human. And there's an element of violence to that. So it's a low bar or a high bar, depending on how you look at it. So, and I'll talk more about this connection idea in a little while. But for now, I want to just set up these reminders for living heartfully. I had this intuition, this urge to put together some statements that were meaningful, something like affirmations. I find affirmations are really useful for me in my getting past a lot of self-criticism. I'm a suicide survivor, so I lived with a heavy critic, and replacing some of the negative life separating thoughts with life affirming thoughts were useful. So I had that interest in formulating some of the essence of nonviolent communication into some just very clear sentences for me. And these reminders for living heartfully are the product of that. So it's most of the NVC principles that I find meaningful, but it's not everything, in a couple hundred words. So I'd like to invite this to be a self-connection exercise, because that's starting with ourselves is the place of resource for us to optimize our walk through the world. So I invite you to just take a moment and just take a scan inwardly, so to speak, and just notice, what are you feeling? There's a sense of openness, curiosity, excitement, boredom. Just take a notice of what's happening without judgment. And as I read through these 13 reminders, can you see them, Jessica? Yeah, great. And I'll read through them twice. I find the second reading actually deepens for me. So number one, I experience empathy with myself and others that naturally fruits as compassionate giving and receiving. I experience empathy with myself and others that naturally fruits as compassionate giving and receiving. 2, I recognize that we all share equally valuable needs and that each of our actions is an attempt to meet some life-serving need. I recognize that we all share equally valuable needs and that each of our actions is an attempt to meet some life-serving need. 3, I distinguish observation from imagination in my perception and communication. I distinguish observation from imagination in my perception and communication. 4, I model honesty by being willing to mindfully express my observations, feelings, needs, and requests. I model honesty by being willing to mindfully express my observations, feelings, needs, and requests. 5, I pause to sense feelings, needs, and my intention before responding to some action, question, or thought. I pause to sense feelings, needs, and my intention before responding to some action, question, or thought. 6, I find creative ways to meet needs instead of thinking there's something wrong or missing with a situation, a person, or me. I find creative ways to meet needs instead of thinking there's something wrong or missing with a situation, a person, or me. 7, I request exactly what I want with someone or with life, instead of demanding what that person do or how some past or future should be. I request exactly what I want with someone or with life, instead of demanding what that person do or how some past or future should be. 8, I savor requests and sense the need drawing me toward or keeping me from saying yes. I savor requests and sense the need drawing me toward or keeping me from saying yes. 9, I express gratitude by sharing how an action affects me and feeds a need instead of praising the actor. I express gratitude by sharing how an action affects me and feeds a need instead of praising the actor. 10, I heal when mourning a regret by sensing sweet pain while accompanied with the essence of our unmet need. I heal when mourning a regret by sensing sweet pain while accompanied with the essence of our unmet need. 11, I transcend domination, submission, and rebellion by valuing the needs of each person, including myself. I transcend domination, submission, and rebellion by valuing the needs of each person, including myself. 12, I co-create contagious, life-serving cultures and systems in my world, relationships, organizations, and communities. I co-create contagious, life-serving cultures and systems in my world, relationships, organizations, and communities. 13, I prize human understanding and connection over any outcome. I prize human understanding and connection over any outcome. So now to finish this as a self-connecting exercise, take another quick scan of your inner life and notice if there's a difference. And I'm wondering, you needn't say, but if any of these reminders stay with you, any notion or concept or something that caught your attention or that brought up a question? If so, just wave or just unmute yourself. We're a small enough group, we can be pretty informal if you ask me. Go ahead, Sandra.
Well, number 3, observation and imagination. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So one of the 4, I mentioned there were just 4 components of nonviolent communication. And one of them, the first one, in the list anyway, is to make a distinction between an observation, just what happened, what a camera and microphone pick up, versus some kind of an interpretation, a judgment, or what I imagine it to be. Okay. So does that help?
Yes. Okay.
And so that reminder points to that fundamental principle of NVC of distinguishing observations from evaluations or interpretations. And the most inclusive way that came to me to express that was observation and imagination.
Okay.
Yeah, Kathleen.
Couldn't unmute myself. The one that has to do with expressing gratitude, but not praising something. Could you repeat that and explain?
Yeah. I express gratitude by, I have these committed to memory. Let me start again. Let me share it, because maybe that's the indication so you can see it while I say it. I express gratitude by sharing how an action affects me and feeds a need instead of praising the actor.
So instead of saying, thank you for that, or you're wonderful for doing that.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that, Kathleen, but the principle here is that we've been educated since ever in a system that perpetuates violence from Rosenberg's perspective. So this domination culture, this the root of violence in Marshall's understanding, as I understand him, is that our system of punishment and reward is the cycle that keeps the domination structures in place. And so we're looking for the outside for validation or to avoid punishment. And so when I say to someone, oh, that was wonderful what you did, it's a lovely sentiment, but it's making me a wonderful thing. What's more connecting is to say, when you said this thing, I felt inspired. And it really gave me gave me an idea of what to do next. That's the idea of giving gratitude in a nonviolent way, not calling somebody wonderful or whatever it is, but naming the observation, naming what they did so they know what you're talking about. If you say, oh, River, this was a wonderful class, I like hearing that, but I'm not exactly sure what you mean, what word. So say what lit you up, so to say, and then how it met one of your needs, how it served life for you. It's a more vulnerable way to share gratitude, but it's so much more enriching, and it gets us out of this cycle of punishment and reward. Does that help? So good. That seems like enough questions for there. Oops, let me share my screen again. I touched something. The world is so sensitive. Errant touches make my eyes blind to you here. My slides are guiding me ahead. So here we are at the purpose of nonviolent communication is to create the quality of connection where it makes it enjoyable for us to contribute to one another's well-being. So the purpose of this nonviolent communication, this language strategy, this perspective of life, is to create connection, human connection, but not connection for connection's sake so much. But when we're connected, when we see each other as human, when we sense that we're not being judged by the other person, or the other person doesn't sense judged by me or us, we naturally collaborate. Just imagine you're walking down the street, there's a stranger, they drop something out of their grocery bag. You know, three people are going to make a gesture toward picking it up if you don't have some reason to like evaluate that person as unworthy. That's just what we do when we're connected human to human. We just want to support each other. It's natural. So the idea of nonviolent communication is setting up the likelihood for connection. So to support this, right. Yeah, so I'd like to do a 5-minute breakout dialogue. Before we go into the more nuts and bolts of NVC, I want to explore this idea of connection, what it means for you and your partner. So for 5 minutes, you'll be paired up with someone. And just if you would be willing to just talk about, what do you enjoy about human connection? Just let the dialogue go where it will. There'll be a 60-second buffer when Jessica calls you back from the breakout room. So 5 minutes with a partner to explore the notion of what do you enjoy about human connection? And then we'll come back as a group. So welcome back. I'd like to hear one or two voices of what's enjoyable about connection before we take the next step together. What do you enjoy about human connection? What was said? Yeah, Willetta? Oh, that's not is that a raised hand or is that? Good, great, perfect.
I thought I'd be orderly.
I like it.
Just what just occurred with Lisa, who I just connected with, just sharing of experiences and knowing that you're not alone and getting encouragement to continue to go the distance.
I notice my mind is quieter when I'm in connection. If I'm not, then I'm trying to either figure out how to get out of the situation or to connect with the person. There's just so much more activity for me. So let's explore the other side. Yeah, go ahead, Kathleen.
We talked about, we came up with some of the same things, that you don't feel alone. It fulfills needs. You feel cared for. You get to exchange ideas and memories, and sometimes you want someone else's advice or opinion. And we didn't get to this, but I suppose depending on what you hear, you might feel connected or not. But that's what we talked about.
Thanks, Kathleen. So we're going to do one more breakout, and Jessica, you'll pair Paul with whoever was with Wendy because she stepped off. Yeah. So this time the invitation is, what blocks human connection? So if you want to take the invitation for the dialogue, what blocks human connection? And see you back in 5. Yeah, so welcome back. And I'd like to hear a voice or two, and if it's okay just to be informal and unmute yourself and go. I kind of like that that idea, but I'm happy also to call on you if you're more comfortable that way. So what's something that blocks connection for you that you heard mentioned in your pair?
Inequality.
So in other words, some perception that there's an inequality of
Power.
status or power, something like that. Yeah.
Distractions, and a sense that the other person is not listening, or that you're not being heard or understood.
Yeah, so a sense that I'm not being heard or understood, or that I can interpret that as I don't matter as much as I'd like to that person. Something like that.
Yeah. And fear of being judged.
Yeah.
Kathleen, we touched on the same points ourselves, every point that you mentioned.
Another one was if you're angry with the person.
Yeah, we talked about that too. I think one of the things I shared was past experiences that, depending on who I'm interacting with, it can trigger something and get in the way of the interactions.
Yeah, it seems like there's some sort of an evaluation, some sort of a judgment about the person's, their opinion about me or things they've done indicates some things. So I've concluded that they're not as worthy of my attention and open-hearted, like giving them enough slack to stay connected. So it seems like it clamps down on my side. There's a constriction that I feel. I'm clutching my heart. There's a visceral, some kind of a change that I don't have a free flow of equanimity when I feel this disconnection. And so it has a lot to do with conclusions that I've made about that person from habitual thing.
That actually came up, I think, with the word in our conversation, which was pause, because you don't feel you can be your authentic self. For fear of something. So, I mean, again, all those things that Kathleen had mentioned. So,
yeah. So now that we've explored a couple of sides of connection, which is a fundamental, foundational piece of this nonviolent communication process, let me go in to talk for a few minutes, maybe 20 even, about some of these fundamental principles. I'm going to have the slideshow going. So speak up if you have a question. I don't see you because I only see 4 faces while this is on. So what is nonviolent communication? To me, it is a language system that makes the likelihood of connection more likely, or a way of looking at the world. It's a point of view. The subtitle of Marshall Rosenberg's book that contains the nuts and bolts of nonviolent communication is Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life. And he defines life as the living energy of being human, especially our feelings and needs. The life lives around these notions of feelings and needs. And I'll define those terms a little more clearly in a moment. I think nonviolent communication is a way of looking at the world. It's a point of view. It's seeing through a filter or a frame of options, of openness, rather than a deficit or a closed frame. I've been playing around with this notion of frame and just noticing how it's impossible for me as human to look at life without a frame. Only in the emptiness is it frameless. So an inspiring speaker that I run across in the last 6 months or so, Trabian Shorters, introduced me to this language of asset framing versus deficit framing. So he defines asset framing as defining people by their aspirations and contributions before noticing their challenges or before noting their challenges. So holding this frame, this asset frame, this a frame of positivity, looking at what's going well rather than what's a danger or what's going wrong, looking for assets rather than deficits. And so this is defining people by their aspirations and contributions before noting the challenges or the things that I find that I don't agree with. Nonviolent communication is also about humanizing one another, recognizing, this is the variation of that second reminder, recognizing that we all share equally valuable needs and that each of our actions is an attempt to meet some life-serving need. Now, this is a fundamental notion in NVC, in nonviolent communication. And I'll use NVC, that acronym, just for efficiency of time. But this isn't a truth. This isn't something that you can prove. But it's something, it's a perspective that I find valuable. To just notice in myself, is this true? Is it true that in everything that I do, that it's an attempt to meet some universal human value, some deep driver? The idea here is that all life is engaged in doing its best to meet its needs every moment. Energy is too precious to waste. So none of us do anything that we don't think is going to make life better for us. Now, the trouble is, there's lots of things that I do, that we do. To do it over again, we try differently. Like, I can remember I was asked to do, I had an agreement with an organizer for something I was doing, and I was asked if I could do a program, and I was really tired. I was done, and I just said, "Yeah, I'll do it." And rather than checking with the organizer, and then I spaced it out, and I had lots of cleanup to do from that decision to say, "Yes, I'll do it." And in that moment, the need that I was trying to meet was just some space. I just needed some rest. I just needed some ease. And so I knew that I shouldn't do it. But in that moment, I said, "Yep, I'll do it." And it turns out that strategy didn't really serve, in that moment, it did serve some ease and peace. But in the big term, it was costly. So looking at we're trying to meet the most needs at the least cost in this system of nonviolent communication. So I'm wondering if this is a big notion. If you haven't wrestled with this notion or chewed on this at all, you might think, well, it's an idea, but I'm not sure I see how this works. Can anybody think of an example of an action that doesn't seem like an attempt to meet a human need? I'm looking for a devil's advocate here, although I don't like that term, but you know what I mean. And you may not. My invitation really is to experiment. Experiment when you're watching things on the news, in literature, in the media. It's fun to play the game of who needs what. Wonder what need they were trying to meet when, like, for example, Will Smith just came to mind when he walked across the stage of the Oscars and slapped Chris Rock. I'm saying the hypothesis here is he was doing his best to meet a need. And his need might have been for respect for himself, his wife, someone he cares about, and just respect in general. These needs are universal. We all have them. Now, it turns out that his action may not have met his need, but that was the best he had in that moment to try to meet his need for respect. And looking back, he might have done something different. But when I realized, yeah, he was going for respect there. I understand that. I can see that. I taught nonviolent communication in different correctional facilities, and I'm thinking of Dante, a friend that was incarcerated in Bayside State Prison, South Jersey, and he was incarcerated for firing a round at a cop, and he felt miserable about being in jail, or being in prison, not just jail, for several years, and was really critical about it. And he got to the point that the need he was trying to meet by pulling that trigger was some power. He was disempowered all his life. He was disrespected from his perspective all his life. And in that moment, he just wanted to show that I've got some power. You owe me some respect. It was a costly decision. It did not meet his need for respect and power, quite the opposite. but he can have compassion for himself. He can have compassion for that decision, even though it's a tragic, tragic decision and could have ended in harm for the cop. It didn't. But this notion of, I wonder what they were trying to do. Is there a positive intention behind anything that anyone does? And to find that, I find that it softens me. It humanizes that person. It helps me have compassion and even holding another possibility for their needs to get met. This is the beauty of this hunt. The hunt for myself, when I reacted to my sister Margaret for criticizing me for misspeaking, I said, you and me instead of you and I, or vice versa. And right now, my mind isn't clear enough to know the right syntax and grammar. But she said, you know better than that. And and I reacted. If I would guess, I wonder what Nietzsche was trying to be. She was being playful. I had a long history that triggered some old programming, but yeah, that may be enough about that. Let me get back to the slides and see what's next here. Okay, so we're talking about nonviolent communication. I said it's simple. There's 3 modes or 3 ways of practicing this this system or this inspiration to find a way. What's the most likely thing I can do now to connect with this human being so that we can have fun partnering and collaborating together? It's really the most fun game there is. So there's 3 ways to do it. There's empathy, which is listening. It's another fancy word for listening, but in this nonviolent communication process, we have it's a language of life. It's a language. There are some unique definitions. There's some special uses of some terms. So empathy is listening. Honesty or honest self-expression or expressing oneself, so speaking. So listening, speaking, and then self-connection. These are the 3 ways or 3 modes of practicing NVC. And there's 4 components. There's 4 parts in no particular order, although they're taught in this way because the ideas kind of build on themselves. But it's a continual flow of observations, feeling, needs, or requests. So the first component, observation, and these 4 components are set up as distinctions. So there's observation, just what happened, what am I feeling? In other words, what's happening in my body? What are my emotions doing? What's my need? What's behind it? What's deeper? What am I really longing for? What's my heart's desire? And then what can I do right now to make life better? Those are the 4 components. So this observation, the distinction is observation versus interpretation, or my imagination, or evaluation. This is tricky because the human mind is designed to interpret. Interpretation and categorizing is an efficient way of processing a lot of data. And the mind and the brain, as we speak of it, its primary function is to protect the organism. It's to continually scan for danger and to avoid that danger and to perpetuate the species. So the habit is to look for danger. And this is where we may have all heard this term, there's a negative bias. Well, negative bias means that the mind is constantly on the lookout for danger, because if I miss danger, it's a problem. If I miss something that's safe or something that's going well, it's not a problem. It doesn't threaten the organism in the same way that something like a snake would. So learning to disentangle my judgments, my conclusions about what's happening versus training myself just to say, aha. And from the stream of experiencing, which, it's always now, it seems like there's this continuous stream of experiencing, pulling out a moment that is noticed. I think it was, someone had, I've lost it now. But anyway, picking out a moment. What would a camera pick up, or a microphone? That's step 1. And it's so much easier to say, don't be critical to me, to someone. That's not as likely to keep the dialogue going as when you said, I didn't like the way that you responded to me, I'm just making this up, I felt worried or felt hurt. So now it's a specific, when I heard you say, is actually, it's even easier, it's more observational to say, I heard you say X, rather than when you said X. Because when you said X may not be, a lot of times I don't hear it exactly the way it's said, or the person speaking may not have realized they said this particular turn of phrase. They may have felt like they said something different. So me owning, when I heard this, I felt that, is easier for the recipient to hear than a conclusion. So that's the step one. Do the discipline for observation versus an interpretation or an evaluation. The second step is, okay, now let me zero in on one example for simplicity here and move ahead. Well, forgive the crude reference, but here it is. Whenever I see dog poop on the sidewalk, it's common for me to get triggered. So when I see dog poop on the sidewalk, the observation is there's dog poop on the sidewalk. There's not some, ignoramus or some person that doesn't follow the social structure, that's not worthy of life, let their dog just willy-nilly go where they want. Can you hear that's evaluation? When I see dog poop on the sidewalk, that's step number one. That's the observation. I see dog poop on the sidewalk. I'm feeling disgust. I'm feeling disappointed. I'm feeling hopeless. That's a feeling. I notice that I clench, my nose wrinkles, versus all these judgments I have about the person, that they're completely, this is what's wrong with the world these days. All of that stuff isn't a feeling. It's experience, it's thought. But the idea here is just what's my feeling in terms of physical sensations, emotions, versus what thinking. Thinking is important to examine, but that's not part of the four components. And then what do I need? What's this value? What's this human resource that propels life that we all share? I see the dog poop. I'm feeling disturbed. My need is for respect. My need is for beauty. I really love beauty, and looking around Philly, sometimes it doesn't meet my ideas of beauty, and that doesn't contribute to. I really long for beauty. I long for cooperation, collaboration, respect for one another. Those are the things that matter to me. Versus a strategy is how we are going to get the need met. So if I think, well, we should shoot the people that don't do it, or we should fine them $1,000. That's a strategy in how to satisfy the need. And making this distinction between a need and a strategy. Here's another one that takes some practice, because we've been educated to wrap up needs and strategies. Most of us have been brought up being told that we need money. Nobody needs money. We need what money can. It's a resource to help us meet our needs. It's a super satisfier in some language. In other words, I can use money as a strategy to meet lots of needs, like shelter, like entertainment, like rest, like play, like novelty, like contributing to life. I can support the things that I care about with this resource. So money is a strategy to meet a need. And this idea of nonviolence, being able to disentangle needs from strategies, we have conflict and we fight over our strategies. We never fight over our needs, because we share our needs, and they're the propellant for us to determine strategies. If we understand everyone's needs, and this is the fundamental of nonviolent mediation, Willetta, is to identify needs first. And in the language that you might be familiar with, it's I've lost it. I've lost it. But noticing if the parties can say what they need, that person really needs understanding and integrity, and I really need to have predictability. I need to know what's going to be next. And then we might be able to find a strategy that everybody can get their needs met or more likely. And then the request: what would make life better? What would make life more wonderful? Versus a demand. Requests are are like proposals. They're open. Would you be willing to do this? And it's not so much how we say it. It's hard to distinguish a request versus a demand until you hear a no. And then if there's a threat of punishment or blame, no matter how nicely it's said, it's still a demand. So being honest and being able to disentangle the difference between a request and a demand, being open to outcome, being open to finding ways to meet everybody's needs, that's the idea. And this request is an important component to be able to ask for clearly what it is that would make life better. And sometimes it's just like, did you hear any criticism in what I just said? In asking the question that you really want to know. That can further the conversation, keep the dialogue open, keep the likelihood of connection there. So there's different kinds of requests we won't have time to get into today, but there's action requests and there are connecting requests. So I just added a little bit to that graphic I saw a minute ago. So listening and speaking, here's empathy and honesty or expressing. And then there's this is Marshall Rosenberg's idea of a logo for nonviolent communication. There's this continuing flow of observations, feelings, needs, requests, observations, feelings, needs, requests, focusing on those components in what we're talking about. In other words, avoid our thinking and especially avoid hearing other person's thoughts. Opening myself to just hearing, what is that person needing? What is that person feeling? What are they needing? What are they feeling? If I stay there, I'll live longer because I won't be so reactive, and it's more likely to find a human connection. So I see here to wait. So I'm going to pause. Golly, it's 8 o'clock. Is there a burning question? I want to go ahead with wait, and then we give us a chance to practice. So I'm going to go back here. So here's a tool. Here's a tip for you to consider. That fifth reminder is I pause to sense feelings, needs, and my intention before responding to some action, question, or thought. Has something to do with waiting. Wait. Why am I talking? If you can pause and just ask yourself, why am I speaking? Am I speaking on behalf of ego? Rosenberg called it jackal, the disconnected part. Am I about to talk to prove a point, to show the other person that they need to, learn something? Or am I about to speak to make the likelihood of understanding more evident, or something like that? Just be clear with yourself. Why am I about to speak? And then choose to speak along with that intention. So just take that moment to wait. Or you can also interpret this wait as, what am I thinking? Are my thoughts in alignment with the kind of connection that I want to foster? Do I want to invite a connection here? And if so, am I entertaining thoughts that are aligned with that? Or am I letting habitual thoughts linger? My invitation is to let the old thoughts honk on by like geese in the sky, and invite from your infinite wisdom well that we're all attached to some other thoughts to come up, some other ideas that might make our connection more likely. So remember, wait. Why am I talking, or what am I thinking? To get clear about your intention, and then let your deep wisdom offer the next step. So we're going to do a little practice of empathy or listening to one another. And I'm curious, I just want to explore for a moment, what is empathy? And according to Marshall Rosenberg, one way to interpret empathy is a respectful understanding of what others are experiencing. A respectful understanding of what others are experiencing. Another way that he described it was, empathy lies in our ability to be present without opinion. In other words, being open, let the person have their experience, and being in wonder, curious about what is it like for them over there, to really attend to what the person might be experiencing that you're with. this attention goes to them. And I'm liking this word attention, which comes from two Latin words, ad, which means to go toward, and ad is to, and then tendere is to stretch. So stretching toward, this attention is a stretching toward. So when I'm attending with someone, or if I want to be empathetic with them, I want my attention there. I want to stretch my attention to the other person, not my responses, not my reactions, not my thoughts, not my similar experiences. Those are all beautiful, but that's not empathy. Empathy is really staying with the other person and being curious and letting their experience lead the conversation. So I want us to do a practice. This will just be a one-time practice. It's going to be a couple times longer than the breakouts we did before. So once again, we'll do it in pairs. You can't do this wrong, but the idea is, if you can, the A is and just decide who's going to be A, who's going to be B. A, I'm suggesting, is the first listener, and B is the first speaker. So you're going to have about 6 minutes each. So speaker, you can talk about whatever you'd like. I'm going to invite you to consider to talk about what's going well, if you need a topic. But if there's something on your mind you'd like to talk about, feel free. This is your time. And you don't need to say a word. This is your time just to have someone with compassionate attention for you. You can be quiet. You don't need to say anything. So A, your job as listener is to zip your lip as best you can and just listen. And when the time is finished, just give one sentence if you can. When the time is up, and you'll watch your own, there'll be a timer in the corner, about 6 minutes. Just give them 1 or 2 sentences of what you felt was most important. What stays with you, what they said. And then switch. And then this time, then B would be the listener and A would be the speaker. You have about 6 minutes for each, and then a minute or so at the end at dialogue just to talk about how it went. Any questions about this next activity? Great. So Jessica, if you could do the magic to send us into a breakout again. So any reports from the field? What stays with you from that practice? Was it easy to do? Did you find it challenging? What came up?
Oh my God, I had so much fun with Paul.
Great.
First of all, the instructions were clear, and so we just jumped right in. Mm-hmm. And he's a good listener and got to the point. And Paul, do you have anything to share? You're on mute. So again, it was really cool sharing advice based on what we heard, and a lot of laughter, a lot of understanding and acknowledging that, hey, we're on the same page. I get you, and I felt heard. And I think Paul felt heard as well.
Yeah, listening, like understanding, is one of these human needs that we've been discussing during this session. And a reliable way for me to satisfy my need for understanding is to do my best to understand another. Then it seems like they're inspired to try to understand me. The offering what I'm longing for is often a way to connect and get my needs met. So really attending to the other and receiving them with openness and giving evidence that you're with them is a pretty reliable route to connection. Focusing on what's it like to be them, what's important to them, and checking out if it's a match.
I feel like Sandra and I just found we seem to have a lot in common, and chatted, what's the word I'm looking for? Easily listening and speaking.
So I'm hearing that there was a real flow of understanding that didn't even maybe need some words.
We seem to have commonalities in how we communicate and some of the things in our background that might be part of why we do some of the things that we do.
Yeah. Something to add, Sandra?
Well, we definitely connected. It was great. It was just felt really good, you know, and I've learned that we can connect through Zoom. We don't have to be in person. So that was good.
Yeah, there's a lot that's available through Zoom. I'm really grateful, and I'm really grateful. Makes this gathering possible, and I feel enriched and appreciative that, you know, that we've added each other to our human family, so to say. I'd like to take just the last moment to mention that in the next day or so, Jessica or someone will send the slides and some resources, but I just want to point out some resources that are here if you want to follow up to learn more about nonviolent communication. There's, of course, the book that I mentioned. There's the Center for Nonviolent Communication, cnvc.org, and then you can get linked to trainers and their offerings, and there's practice groups that are often free available around. The NVC Academy is associated with CNVC, but it's really the training arm. So there is lots of free and then subscription opportunities for learning from different trainers. There's a free introduction to nonviolent communication that I highly recommend. And YouTube is filled with all kinds of resources, and a more advanced training is called Making Life Wonderful. It's an intermediate training. It's a 4-part recording of a couple hours or more each part, taken with Marshall Rosenberg during a 9-day residential intensive training. And he does lots of role plays. If you want to see nonviolent communication in action, that's as rich a resource as I know. So in terms of wrapping up, I'd like to do a round, given an opportunity for everyone to speak. And if you'd like to pass, that's completely fine. In my view, passing is participating. But the invitation is to say, what was most useful for you in our time together? What was most useful for you? And for efficiency, I'd like the first person that has something to offer just speak, and then I'll call in folks just so that the waiting in between is minimized. What was most useful for you? In one sentence, please, or fewer. It could be a phrase, not a whole sentence. You can't do less than one unless you're going to pass.
One of the phrases that really will stick with me is when you stated we fight over strategy versus meeting a need. That really struck home.
Thank you, Aletta. Can we go to Cindy and then Kathleen?
I think the idea of being less judgmental, you know, trying to listen, not make judgments, and that would help me as I'm communicating.
Thank you, Cindy. Kathleen and then Sandra.
I too, like Willetta, was struck by the needs versus strategy. I had not thought about it that way, but the other thing that struck with me was when you're talking about the dog poop, the difference between the thoughts and the feelings. So I found this whole session to be really interesting and helpful.
Thank you, Kathleen. Sandra and then Paul.
Well, I think my first question to you about observation and interpretation, and thinking how I do that was most helpful to me. And I don't want this to end. It's the first I've learned about nonviolent communication. I really like it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sandra. Paul, then Patricia. Go ahead, Patricia. I see you've unmuted. We'll try Paul after Patricia.
I think that the things that were important to me was to look at, I mean, it's like I can't do it all, but recognizing my own feelings, and through observation, with non-judgment, another person, what their needs are, puts a whole new look at conversation and communication for me.
Yes, it's a different world. It really is. I like the way you said that, Patricia. Paul, if you can unmute, you're next, and then Susan. Three, two, one. Susan, you ready to go? Then Cindy. Or Cindy, yeah. Then Jessica.
I think all of those points that you started with, even though you read them twice, I did not get to absorb them enough. And I think those are going to be really useful to me once I unpack them and actually can put some of those into practice. I think it could change the way that I communicate and lower my blood pressure at the same time.
Well, I'm glad they resonate with you, Susan. I use them a lot. I've committed them to memory, and they help me get back to sleep at night. I don't go through the whole thing, but I like hanging out with those ideas. It steeps in me something like tea. It helps a different inner world stay more accessible. So Jessica, and then I'll give Paul you the last chance, and I'll go.
Yeah, I was also going to say, I always love hearing the heartful reminders. It's actually a really good way to start the day. So if Susan, you want to start your day with that, I'll send you a link to the PDF of that.
Paul, if you're there, you'll go after me. So what was most useful for me was the pairs. I just loved that we were of a number that I got to play. So it's really useful to make those connections, because it's different if I don't get that one-on-one time. So thank you, my partners. And Paul, you were one. I'm guessing you may not be there, even though it looks like you're there, or you might be desperately communicating with us and having technical issues. But I'm going to let it go. So thank you all for caring about finding ways to become more effective at connecting with one another, to bring peace alive in your life. And I'm reminded, I'm glad I am speaking now, because there's my favorite quote from Marshall Rosenberg that I want to share with you. Anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. Anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. My very first workshop with Marshall, he said that toward the end. And it gave me permission to try these techniques, because I am of the ilk that I want to think that I'm pretty competent at something before I do it. I was youngest in my family and was the late speaker because I wanted to be good at it before I did it. This notion, if it's worth doing before I'm good at it. And I find that even if I'm clumsy, and I am often, the benefits are immense. This different perspective, this intention of what matters to this person, what might be their motive, it changes everything. Just coming from your eyes is an invitation for connection, just because they can see that there's not judgment going on. There's a genuine curiosity of what matters, what makes this person tick. It changes things. It really, it's remarkable. This can be done without words. The words help, but it's really a point of view. And it's our natural way of being. So it's not something that you have to learn. For me, it's getting stuff out of the way that I've learned that get in the way of me connecting well. These skills are useful, but it's our natural way of connecting as far as being, as far as I can tell. So thanks again for taking the time. Any last words, Jessica? Is there evaluation or something from Peace Through Action?